Hey, so I'm running around doing some errands today, and I just come to a point in time to where I just stopped and I was reflecting back on a conversation that I had earlier in the week with an individual, and that individual just so happened to be one of the coaches that I had in high school. And so I've been out of high school for 24 years. It'll be 24 years in May. So I'm thinking back, and he's talking about the team, talking about the years that we spent together, and he starts talking about individual players, and he brings up a player's name and talks about him, reflects on him a little bit, and brings myself up, talks about our interaction, our time together, a little bit. And he brings up another player, and he just makes a comment. Man, he was hard to coach. That was a player that was hard to coach. And went back, reflected on other players. Hey, they were easy to coach, and success. And don't get me wrong, we didn't play for a successful team in the matters of wins and losses, but if you look at our program and the years that we were involved in the program, there was some big deals, some big changes that took place. So I'm reflecting back personally. Okay, so if he's saying that about myself, these players, and then talking about this individual or this type of player, what's the difference? What makes one easy to coach? What makes one hard to coach? So what's the difference? So again, doing just a little bit of a self-reflection, I think back, and between my junior high or middle school years going into my freshman year, again, I'm all about making packs and making changes and setting my mind, towards, different goals and standards, if you will. And in middle school and junior high, I was a slob. I was overweight. My 8th grade year, I remember wearing jogging pants to school every single day. At basketball practice, it wasn't a battle per se between who finished first in line tappers. It was a battle between me and another, couple few kids on, dude, I just didn't want to finish last. And graduated 8th grade, and I done a lot of self-reflecting that summer. And I do remember that I told myself, I will not be like this. This is what I'm going to be. And this is what I'm going to strive to be. And that's what I did, so that's what I went after. Some of that was good for me. Some of that was bad for me. That was probably back in the day whenever the term RBF wasn't even out there, but I was probably a self-proclaimed of the RBF. And anybody that knows anything about acronyms and teenagers nowadays, anyone can tell you what an RBF is. So, we make light of that, but that was how my mindset was. I was focused and driven, into an aspect of, here's what we're doing. Here's where we're going. Here's the standards that we set. And, that's what I did. So with that, again, a little bit of self-reflecting today, I'm thinking back, I didn't play basketball my freshman year. And the reason why I didn't play basketball my freshman year was because the memories of basketball that I had from middle school, from junior high, were so imprinted in my memory that I wasn't mentally prepared to play basketball. I wasn't mentally prepared to play and participate at a level, because I kind of held a grudge. I kind of had a chip on my shoulder in a bad way. So bypassed it, came around, sophomore year, and I played. And kind of still had a bitter taste. I played, but still had a chip on my shoulder in a way that I hadn't turned away from it. I hadn't made any, drastic changes, to, make the best out of it. Again, going into my junior year, some things happened. I didn't play basketball my junior year. Getting into my senior year, obviously, last year of football. And I was like, you know what? I'm playing basketball. And I just kind of felt a huge weight lifted off of my shoulder in the terms of I had separated myself from the junk that I had came into contact with, 3, 4, 5 years ago in the middle school and the junior high era of playing basketball, that I was like, you know what? I'm not playing for them. I'm not playing for anybody but myself, and I'm going to compete at a level in which it goes along with the standards in which I set for myself. And I set some pretty high standards. Some would debate, on how high they were, were they high enough? Well, based on the information and the level of knowledge that I had as a person, as an individual, as an athlete at that time, I felt comfortable with where they were set. Looking back, yeah, they probably weren't high enough. So then going along with that, I'm thinking, how does an athlete make an impact in a way that 24 years later, when they're talking about, sports and athletes and players, with a coach that they had, where does that impact come from? Where does that influence, if you will, where does that come from? So again, I rewind back, self-reflect, and I'm thinking, I wasn't anybody special. I was determined. Football was a new sport for me. I had never been around football, but I was determined. I was determined to make an impact. I was determined to, participate in a sport that I knew absolutely zero about, and I fell in love with it. And when I fell in love with it, it's kind of like, you meet your first love or your first crush, and you fall head over heels, and it's like cashed out. I'm not talking to my buddies, I'm not talking to my girlfriends, this is what I'm doing. I was ate up with football. But to a level of, feed me. I want more. I want more. What does a good competitive player, and it could be, you could relate it to any sports. What does that look like? What influence are you being, approached with and being around, that will continue to cause you to level up. And again, I was just driven. I was driven in a mode, in a mindset, in a frame of mind that I just made a decision to go. Along with that decision also come a time of, I don't want to say that I was put on a pedestal, but I started separating from the pack. So, you talk about, junior high, middle school, basketball, for me, myself, read a book, Urban Meyer talks about, the 10-80-10, and the lower 10% is the people that, man, you can't change them. Yeah, you can kind of reflect on them and get them motivated to maybe get up into the 80%, but the 80% is the crowd. Well, guess what happens in a crowd? So if you think about Walmart, you're out in Walmart, you're at a mall, you're at a shopping center, and you're looking for somebody, and they're in the crowd. Where are they at? They're lost. You can't find them. Okay? So if you think about 10%, let's go to the top 10%. You can find them. You can see where they're at. They're in the weight room. They're on the field. Their standards are set so high that if they're in the 80%, they get lost. So, again, self-reflecting, thinking about events that are taking place. Where you at? Where are we at? Where am I at now? And we don't even have to be talking about athletes. Let's just talk about people in general. So when you scan the area, if you see people that look the same, that dress the same, they act the same, and you probably act or react the way that the 5 closest people around you act or react, you kind of get lost in the crowd. So, how do you impact people? Let's talk about coaches, scouts, maybe even, boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses. If you're in the 80%, if you're in the crowd, things get lost in the crowd. So if we stay in the 10%, okay, so we do what the coach tells us to do. We do what our employer tells us to do. But not only that, we strive to be better every single day, and we don't settle for, man, I'm going with the paces. I'm going with the flow. Well, sometimes, to go with the flow, you kind of got to be pushed and shoved. Well, man, sometimes I don't like being pushed and shoved. I like to be the one pushing and shoving into where I want to go. So then I think about, there's a big pitch on, stay in your lane, and, and I get it. I understand the context. Stay in your lane, stay focused and driven on point A to point B. That's great. But if you stay in your lane, guess what happens? You can't pass anybody. Let me say that again. So if you stay in your lane, you cannot pass anybody. So if you ride up on somebody and y'all are in the same lane, you got to get out of your lane to pass them. Okay? So we think about influence, we think about impact, and the influence and impact that we have on other people's lives. Just to recap, what makes a person stand out or be different? Not in a negative way, but in a positive way. So, wow, man, I want to be like that. Okay, so what are they doing? What impact or influence do they have on other people? Man, they listen to the coach, and they do this, and they do this, and they do this. They listen to, parents, and yeah, I get it. Maybe we don't agree with them all the time, but obedience is part of our life. It is. But with that being said, what are we doing to get up into the top 10%? What are we doing to make an impact in other people's daily lives by us getting a percent better or getting better every single day? People see that. People's always watching us. Don't take that as an added amount of pressure, but think of it as, okay, what can I do to stay focused and driven with the matters at hand that I want to do for my life? That's a challenge for me too. So I think about, just athletes in general. If we're just talking about athletes, which are the ones that makes the impact, that makes the influence? It's the ones that, they have a great relationship with their teammates. They listen to their other teammates. They instruct other teammates in a manner of almost like a coach, but it's more of like a player coach type deal. It's someone that other players, other teammates can go to and ask for guidance, and it's given to them in a manner of encouragement, support, but yet accountability. Hey, we can do better, and here's how we're going to do better. So reflecting back, went through 4 years of high school football. I realized real quick, at the end of my game 9, senior year, that was it. That was the last one. And it's kind of, I don't know if it's embarrassing to say this or not, but or humbling, or however you want to put it. But at the end of the game, I'm in the locker room, face painted up, helmet on, geared up, nothing was taken off. And we had a sofa in our locker room, and I'm crying. I'm weeping, because I get it. I understand that we have come to the end of a season, figuratively, and an actual season. High school football as a whole, it's done. It's over. And one of the underclassmen walked up, and on his way out, he patted me. I'm getting cold chills now as I'm saying this. He patted me on the shoulder pad, and he grabbed it, and he said, "I love you, boss. Keep being you." Now, the reason why that gives me cold chills is because I was one of 4 captains my senior year in our high school football team. Each one of us had names, if you will, on our helmet, little bitty letters. For the life of me, I cannot remember any of the other 3s, but I remember that the ones on my helmet, the name on my helmet said boss. And the reason why it gives me cold chills is because I didn't know that 3 years later, I would be hired into a job, into a position, and eventually 10 years after that, I would be hired into a position of, a supervisor, a boss, a mentor, as a coaching role. And, everything happens for a reason. So what we're doing today reflects tomorrow, although we should never lose track of today's events. So as athletes, as people, as individuals, it's very important that not only do we look through a microscope in the microcosm of events that are taking place today, but we're also looking through a telescope to be focused on, where we're going. Where do we want to go? How do we want to impact people? How do we want to influence people? Where do we want to go to college at? Okay, what are we doing now? Microscope, telescope. Okay, looking in, looking out. We have to do that in our lives. That's a challenge for everybody. So this is a long one. It's a long video. I'm sure a lot of it probably combined with, maybe I'm rambling, but the fact of the matter is, if we talk about how we want to influence people, first and foremost, we have to be focused, determined, and driven on what we want to do. Once we become free with what we want to do, okay, now let's get after it. Now, how does our personal integrity and our disciplines and standards fall in line in a manner that affect not only today's events, but tomorrow's life? So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm out.